Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Curry Bordelon, faculty at UAB School of Nursing and the Vice President for the American Association for Men in Nursing. Thank you for joining us today in our discussion of boardroom basics and orientation to service in healthcare. During our discussion today, we will talk about several different learning opportunities when it comes to understanding what board service means, what board service opportunities are available, what does it mean to be able to understand the board rules and regulations, but also how you can become more involved. How do you match your passion within service, or how do you match your skill set within service into board work? So supporting the underrepresented nurses for successful board service and the NOBC mission alignment. One of the big things that we're trying to do with this series of discussions and learning opportunities is to have a deeper understanding of not only the basics of board service, but how you as an individual, as a professional, can become more and more involved with activities. The NOBC's mission is to improve the health and communities through the service of nurses on boards and other governing bodies. The overall program goal is to increase health equity across America through the increased number of minority and underrepresented minority nurses on boards, commissions, and appointments. So by doing so, we've carefully aligned not only the work of NOBC, but also the mission work of making sure that underrepresented populations and peoples are part of this change, or part of this organizational structure. It is incredibly important for boards to look like the members they represent. And by doing so, by diversifying the board population, the board composition, then you're providing a more diverse and far more inclusive opportunity for members. So through this, there's been a grant that's been funded by the American Nursing Foundation that helps empower this educational opportunity, but also helps bring light to opportunities within board service, but these educational opportunities for all different organizations. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a part of the leadership team for the American Association for Men in Nursing. And one of our missions is exactly that, not only to diversify the workforce, but also to bring more light to diverse populations in need of healthcare, such as men and male patients, who often get underrepresented when it comes to primary care services, preventative care services, and so forth. So the natural alignment with NOBC's mission, with the grant, and with the American Association for Men in Nursing provided this opportunity for us to share this content and share our learning and knowledge within our participants. So briefly, this pre-survey that's available, this pre-educational survey is for you to have an understanding of where you are as an individual related to this content, related to the discussion that we're going to have today. So this is an opportunity for you to give us feedback. If you could take a quick moment to take this QR code and provide some feedback into this anonymous survey, that gives us an opportunity to not only gauge the pre and post learning, but to see a trend in how effective this educational content is. Board service training. So personal responsibilities and core competencies, types of boards that are available, board roles, like what are your activities within that role? What are your expectations within that role on a board? What are some of the rules and communications that are commonplace within different boards? And also financial considerations. During our time today, we'll talk about some of these in detail, depending upon the topic. But again, this is sort of a broad overview of what we're going to do. How do I find the right spot for me? This probably is one of the most challenging obstacles for many people to become more involved. When you look at the total population of individuals, nurses, non-nurses, healthcare professionals, and so forth, that are part of professional organizations, it's quite low. You will find some are more engaged than others, whether it be a requirement to be part of a professional organization or not. But in general, nursing tends to have a very low participation rate. You might go to a conference, you might go to a learning activity, you might go to present a poster or so forth, but you may not be part of that professional organization. There's so many opportunities out there for you to become more and more engaged. Start with an open mind. So for you to figure out how or what organization you're part of or want to be part of, start with that open mind. Start with that inquisitive mind of trying to figure out what is my best fit. In many cases, it's related to a specialty or related to a population of interest for you. So look at ways that you can align what you're interested in with your professional development. Understand your own personal mission. What do I want to be? What professional do I want to be? Form assessments of self and of the organization. This is where most our organizations put a lot of content on their websites related to who they are, what their missions are, what opportunities they have. This is your opportunity to start investigating that. Where do I fit in? Will this align with my goals professionally? Prepare a professional bio. This is that 100 to 150 word elevator pitch. And when I say that is, if someone asks you today, tell me about your credentials, tell me about your professional experience, tell me about your impact, and tell me about your passion. When I do so, when I ask students to do this in some of the leadership courses that I run, it's often to say, in a snapshot, tell me who you are professionally. And that's great. We're not talking about travel and personal and, pets and all those things. It's about professionally who you are. And that quick snapshot gives a glimpse into your area, your focus, and so forth. Professional bios is a reflective exercise for you to be able to do that. Learning more about the organization. It's incredibly important that you not commit to something that you're not prepared to be part of. And so it's very important that you dive off into the mission and vision and cultural values and so forth of a professional organization that you're interested in. Register with NOBC. There's a great opportunity for networking within NOBC. There's a lot of learning opportunity, both with annual conferences, learning opportunities such as this and so forth, but also a collaborative approach, because it's about supporting other nursing organizations. It might not be a fit that you're part of the American Association for Men in Nursing, but there might be other organizations that are in alliance with us that might have a better fit for you. Lean into your values. Incredibly important that you understand, again, your self-reflection of who you are professionally, but also as an individual, and how does that fit into the organization. The board service readiness, this is your self-reflection. What we often do is we try to tell people to make sure you're self-reflecting before you jump into a commitment. What are your passions? What are your curiosities about the community? What are your interests in developing as a leader? How are you feel comfortable speaking to others about healthcare or speaking up about healthcare advocacy? So you're looking for ways that where's your fit? What skills do you have that can bring to the organization? What values can you bring to the organization? So what we're going to talk about here is a lot of core competencies for readiness. We're going to talk about these core competencies, and we're going to move through them as a broad overview. Again, that's the back to the basics piece. We're going to move through these as a broad overview of some of the key items you need to look for whenever you're having these conversations or that self-reflection. So let's start with mission, vision, values, and strategic plan. Most all organizations that are reputable always have their mission, vision, and values somewhere on their website. And that's to identify who they are as an organization. So if you're mission driven, is the ability to be committed to advancing the organization's mission, meaning the mission for the organization is X. I align with X and I'm ready to help serve to continue that work. So it's not well enough that an organization just puts a mission out there. It's like, can that mission not only be supported by the work of the organization, but do people buy into that mission? Do they aspire and connect with that mission? So as a mission, vision, value, and strategic plan, you want to identify how to locate. So the basics is where to even find it on the website. Is the mission, vision, and values and strategic plan, are they very clearly defined? Are they easy to identify? Are they connecting with the work of the organization? So if they say, for example, the American Association for Men in Nursing supports the diversity of workforce, but it also supports education and partnership and so forth with expanding diversity in healthcare for patient populations such as men. So it's important to identify what is available within the website, what is available within social media, what's available within learning opportunities and CEs. Does it connect in with the mission and vision? Who has the influence on the mission and vision? Is it the executive board? Is it the membership and so forth? Is it shared or part of a larger company? So it might be that a certain organization is part of a subgroup for a larger organization. These are all the kind of questions that you ask whenever you're identifying that organization. Leadership. Leadership is a behavior. It's not a position. And I want to repeat that so that way everyone is very clear. Leadership is not a position. There are many people that are in positions of power or influence or in leadership positions that are not leaders. We all know that. We know that within clinical practice. We know that within education. We know that within research. We know that within organizational leadership. Just because you're in a role doesn't make you a leader. Leaders empower others to be leaders. Leaders aspire based on behavior to have others become leaders. Leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. And that's incredibly important to understand as a leader and what your abilities are. Two of the big things for me always that I aspire to is leaders have to be agile. You have to be able to pivot because things change constantly. But you also have to be empathetic, very important to that. One of the other big traits that I have is vulnerability. So you have to be empathetic to others' vision and mission. You have to be empathetic to the needs. You have to be understand and so forth. But empathy also is being vulnerable. So vulnerability is understanding your limits. I know where my weaknesses are as a leader. I know where, and I'll be the first one to tell you where my weaknesses are. But I turn those into many opportunities to make sure I gather people around me that can help augment that learning experience or augment that activity to help me where I know where my vulnerabilities are. So it's incredibly important that you understand that as a leader as you empower others. Leadership styles, there's different styles of leadership. I'm sure we've all seen this in different ways. The technical leader is the individual contributor or employee. That's an individual concerned with self-survival. They're in there for tasks. They can be great leaders for those tasks. They can get those tasks done. You may not see them part of big work groups or big development plans and so forth. Then you have that transactional leader. Those are the people seen as continually exchanging resources. For example, managers is quite frequently within health systems, within organizations and so forth. Managers are those transactional leaders because they make sure the operations are running. They make sure things are influenced by others, their resource management, people management, and so forth. Whereas transformational leaders are different. Those are the inspirational people. They have the vision, the mission. They have an overall arching goal of where they would like to see the organization go or where the organization can go. They have that lens to be able to identify beyond the operations piece and what can we really do as a strategic plan. So that's the difference in that operational. So you have the individual, you have the operational, then you have that truly transformational leader where it's organization and visionary based, okay? Cultural awareness and competency. So cultural awareness and competence is for you to understand the ability to conceptualize, communicate, and to lead a transformative process that acknowledges the importance of cultures, including differences, diverse values, beliefs, and so forth. Now, instinctively, when we talk about cultural competence or cultural awareness, we're thinking about a culture of people or gender, race, age, and so forth. But it also is about ideas. So an individual who comes from a private university, has been in a private university setting, school of nursing setting, or so forth for many, many, many years, may not have experience in the public setting or may not have experience with a large professional organization. But they do bring an awareness to that population. So that culture, that individual's knowledge is incredibly valuable to an organization. However, there are many nursing organizations that function in a monolith. And when I say that is they have an organizational structure that favors individuals that look like them, that function like them, similar background, and so forth. But what that does, it creates a very siloed vision of what's available in nursing, what's available in education, what's available in research and service. So it's incredibly important that as you're diversifying, as you're looking for a board position to be in, as you're looking for ways to be involved, does that board look diverse to you? Does that board function diverse? Are there diversity of backgrounds for different sites? So maybe you have a dean of a particular university, faculty from different universities, different work groups that have different individuals of different educational backgrounds. So it's important that you understand that and consider that as you're looking for a board to be involved in. It's a recognition of one's own unique cultures, because you can't be part of, you can't commit to an organization or a board or an activity without understanding self. Self-reflection is incredibly important. What are your own mission, vision, and values? We've talked about that from the beginning. What are your own takes? What are your own vision and values that you have for yourself? Where do you want to be professionally? And how does that translate into what you can bring into an organization? Empathy for diverse backgrounds. Again, this goes back to the monolith approach of a silo where individuals believe and aspire in a single monolith, but you want to keep that open. You want to have empathy for other diversity of ideas. One of the greatest things I had an executive coach tell me is true leaders at high levels believe in one thing right off the bat in any new organization, in any new task force, in any new group. I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm not the smartest person in any space. I'm not the smartest person. The really impactful leaders and powerful leaders are those part of large organizations. They bring in the smart people in the room. So it's not intended that you walk in thinking you're the smartest person, because if you do so, you've already gotten behind where you should be as a leader. It's what can you bring? Tell me about this. Who can lead this effort? Who can bring this activity? So it's gathering that area of expertise to diversify that workforce of that group. Seeking an understanding of others. This goes with empathy. So when you empathize others' backgrounds, others' understandings, others' belief systems, others' skill set, that is what is needed for the organization. But that's also how you diversify and become culturally competent in those spaces. It has there's plenty of data out there that talks about a more diversified workforce, a more diversified healthcare population, and so forth, has a higher level of productivity, reduced turnovers, and increases inclusivity. You feel like and you look like the board that's representing you. The board doesn't always make every single decision. The board needs to include others into that decision-making for people to feel like they're included in the decision-making. So it's paramount that we're looking at a board to say, we are not a closed door executive group that makes any and all decisions for the organization. We are about including individuals. Maybe it's a needs assessment that needs to go out. Maybe it's a survey to members. By asking the members for input, by asking the organizational partners for input, by asking everyone involved for different input, you're including them in the thought process. And then you translate that into your action items, translate that into your change that you might have within the organization. And when you do so, report back to the members. Maybe it's a newsletter, maybe it's during a conference. So you say, we had a needs assessment. We asked what you wanted. We asked the members what they needed, what they wanted to see develop. We made these changes. We've measured these changes and saw positive outcomes. We want to give back to you. This is how vital your input is into the organization, into our activities within the organization. It gets more people interested in potentially becoming board members. So now let's talk about types of boards. So there's different types of boards based on the different organizational structure that you may have. Size of the organization plays into it, for-profit, not-for-profit, and so forth. Boards who have strategic influence to improve the health of communities. That's what determines the type of board that you might need. This includes any corporate, governmental, nonprofit, and so forth. The advisory boards. What type of board is it? What type of activity do you need? Some big professional organizations might have two different boards. Maybe there's an executive committee. Maybe there's a larger board that has to do with all the leadership board, executive board. Maybe it's a junior executive board where you're mentoring the next generation. Maybe it's students. So there's different types of organizations and different types of boards and responsibilities. Right. So let's talk about these types of boards: private and public, advisory, appointments, and nonprofit. So private and public corporate boards. All corporate industry boards are of various structures and sizes, ranging from startup companies to more entrepreneurial, innovative type arrangements in all industry, including finance. Again, there are many types of boards out there. The majority of them have a templated sort of structure of, the main players, president or, executive director, whatever it might be, president, vice president, president-elect, structural such as that. core members, and you have at-large members that support the ongoing effort and work. Then you might have committee members that support those efforts and work. So corporate, from the corporate standpoint, public or private, they typically have a very structured approach where people might be in those roles for quite a long period of time. They may not have the same, they might be attached to a job function. So you might have a leadership structure within the building that's related to job function, treasury and all these different functions. But then you might have an executive board that helps run those elements or help advise those elements, and those might be appointed or elected. Types of boards, we'll go back to advisory. This type of organizational board is more of providing strategic advice, ranging from startup companies, small businesses, and so forth. So you might have an advisory board or an advisory panel that is a group of expertise. So say, for instance, you have a group of educators who are all different schools of nursing, and they are on an advisory board. And this advisory board are all there as an advisory board to start up a new nursing program in a location that's never been done before, or to start off a whole different program, or maybe it's to start a healthcare arm. So there's advisory boards that can be part of a subgroup of people that give professional advice based on those experiences. A lot of times those advisory board members are invited based on expertise, based on knowledge within the community, and based on knowledge of topic. Commissions or appointments, there are numerous and varied. They may be appointed by a president or governor or mayor and so forth. So you might have appointments to different boards. For example, the Alabama Board of Nursing, there's appointments to the board that's set forth by the governor. There are some elected positions within the Alabama Board of Nursing, and that's not uncommon for other boards of nursing, other advisory groups, and so forth. You may have a part of those that are appointed by upper leadership and so forth, but you might have task forces and positions that you might have an ad hoc position of an appointment related to board activity. What's really important to understand here is, as you've seen with the different types of boards, it may not be a single framing. It could be very different approaches. Excuse me. It could be very different approaches for different types of boards. And boards might appoint ad hoc members of a board to do an activity or a task force activity. For example, you want to develop a certification or develop a research arm. So the president or the board can appoint ad hoc members and put a call out. We're looking for people to be part of a research committee. Please put your name if you're interested. So the president of the organization or chairman can put in as an ad hoc committee for a period of time. That's based on bylaws. So you have every right to be able to do so. But again, each board has a little bit different structure, providing you with multiple ways of being involved. And it may not be in a full elected position. It could be just levels of involvement based on whatever the needs are. Nonprofits is a category of all types of nonprofit organizations, regardless of size. It's serving the need of a community. It's serving the need of a population, but it is not marred down by a lot of the legal and the financial requirements that a for-profit would be, such as stakeholders and chairmen of the board and so forth. So you might have nonprofit organizations that might have advisory boards. They could have board chairs and so forth that help guide, but it's not, the sole purpose is not to make money. And the sole purpose is you're probably making money. You need money to survive in the organization, but it's to put the money back into the organization for advancement and improvement. But again, it helps with taxation. There's all these different little pieces and benefits of a nonprofit versus a for-profit. But again, the for-profit has, their own type of benefits as well. So for nonprofit boards, responsibilities is to determine the mission and purpose. It is the board's responsibility to create and review a statement of mission and purpose that articulates organizational goals. So with a board that's nonprofit, or many other boards for that matter, for a nonprofit board, it is their board's responsibility to make sure that we're creating a very clearly defined boundary of what the function of the organization is, what the mission of the organization, what are the goals of the organization, and so forth. They typically select some sort of chief executive, and it could be executive directors and so forth. Nonprofits still very much might also have elected officials, such as president, vice president, president-elect, and so forth, treasury and so forth. It just depends on whatever the structure of the organization is and the size. I've been part of different organizations. I'm part of one now that does not have an elected platform for any of the board members. It's an appointed executive role, and there's a chief executive officer that then asks for, in different regions of the country, who is interested. If you can't do it, who else might be interested? So it allows us all to be part of the organization, but it's not an elected type process. There are rotations every 2 years where, if you're more than welcome to come back into the organization, you can stay an extra 2 years or so forth, but it's not an elected process. So it just depends on the organization. To support and evaluate the chief executive, the board should ensure that the chief executive has the moral and professional support. And what's meant by that is those who are on the board, or those who are ad hoc committees, or whatever the structure might be, the intent is to support the organization. But it's also the strategic plan of the executive group to be able to guide that. Again, we talked about leaders earlier. Leadership is not a role, it's not a position, it's a behavior. So someone who's in that executive leadership role with a vision and of where the organization can go or would like to go, the chief executive is the one that influences others to get them to a place to all lead efforts to keep that mission and vision going in that right direction. So regardless if it's nonprofit, profit, elected, non-elected, appointed, and so forth, whoever that executive leader is, that individual helps guide the progress of the organization. They also ensure effective planning. So it's incredibly important, again, that the chief executive and their individuals who are supporting the work are all effective planners when it comes to bringing activities forward, whether it be educational opportunities, funding opportunities, and so forth. To monitor and strengthen the programs and services, the board's responsibility is to determine which programs are consistent with the organization's mission. Again, that if you are, for example, I go back to Men in Nursing organization, the AAMN has very deliberate and very specific mission and vision values. Well, all of our activities are directly aligned with that. But if you have a professional organization for, say, example, heart health, and yet there's an enormous amount of content all focused on renal health or something else that does, our women's, whatever it might be, that doesn't completely align with the mission and vision, or they're doing all advocacy work and no educational content. Whatever, make sure that whatever board you're part of, or if you're in those leadership roles, that the activities of the organization directly align with the intent of the organization. Okay. They ensure financial resources. So we all, even nonprofits, still have to make money to get the activities going, whether it be to host a conference, whether it be an educational opportunity, to have electronic presence through social media or web services and so forth. All that does take some money. So if your organization takes membership money or professional development money or scholarship money, then all of that goes directly back into the organization. You have to have mechanisms to protect those assets and provide financial oversight. It's important that you don't have one person in control of all things, decision-making, money, and so forth. That's an internal checks and balance that might be missing in that situation. The executive team builds a competent board. That's what the whole purpose is. You're making sure that those individuals who are on those board roles, those positions that are being filled, are by individuals who are ethical. They're going to follow legal precedent. They're going to be financial stewards, but they want to make sure that they're aligning with the professional organization's mission and vision. Enhance the organization's public standing. As leadership within these organizations, your presence represents the organization. If you're at a conference, for example, if there's 35 of us at the NOBC meeting, and we're all part of different organizations, we are there representing the organization that we're a leader for. And you have to understand that what you say and do can influence that. How you present yourself, what activities you do, all of that plays into a representative of that organization. You don't want to have someone who's a very risky person in leadership role, you have no idea how they're going to represent the organization. So if that person's in leadership and does things they shouldn't be doing and is not, professional and very illegal with money handling or whatever it might be, that is a representation of the organization. Nonprofit boards, you have board of governors, board of directors, board of trustees. How are the board members elected? That's depending upon your bylaws. The bylaws of those professional organizations, you can have members, you can have chapters. So if you might have a national organization, you could have state-based chapters, you can have regional chapters, you can have affiliate type chapters, you can have at-large chapters or other groups that connect in with your professional organizations. Executive committees act on behalf of the board. So if the board is describing a strategic plan, then the executive committee then will carry out that plan. But not all places they might have a board, but not an executive committee. Some have one or the other. Some have both. It just depends on the size of the organization. That's all part of the discovery of you understanding where that organization is, what the structure of that organization is. Roles and responsibilities. What are the responsibilities of the individual board members? What are each of your job roles? What are the responsibilities and expectations for each member? In most all cases, there is well-defined bylaws that tell you that. Most organizations. If the bylaws are lacking, it just lists the positions with no responsibilities. That might be your first thing that you bring forward as you're becoming part of the board or executive committee. Can we clearly define the expectations? If you have clearly defined expectations, then you have something to go back on if someone's not performing, and it keeps them responsible. So what are the responsibilities for individual board members? It varies based on the organization, but the general responsibility is to attend board meetings and committee meetings. Be engaged. You can't be part of the leadership if you show up once a year at the conference. There's a lot more work, and we all know this as board members and committee members and so forth. There's a lot more work that goes on day to day. Be informed about the organization's mission vision. Actually knowing that. If you're part of the board, elected or appointed, and you have no idea what the mission and vision is, you're behind. You should know that before you ran for the board or got appointed for the board. Review agenda and supporting materials prior to meetings. Be prepared. So show up to the executive meeting, to the board meeting, whatever frequency that is, and be prepared to have a conversation. It's not efficient. It loses value, and people lose their impression of you if you're scrambling around like, I just didn't have time to look at this at all. I know I've had it for a week. I just didn't look at it. Tell me what I need to know. When you dismiss that, then basically you said all the time and energy put forward by someone to bring the agenda items forward to the meeting, you've dismissed the whole thing. Be prepared. Make a personal financial contribution to the organization. It's not uncommon for organizations to have scholarship opportunities, donations, beyond just membership. They have other ways to become more and more involved. If the work of the organization is to support a population of people, education, students, whatever it might be, this is how you can become involved. And in most all cases, all of this is tax deductible for you. So it could be a tax benefit from you as well. Suggest possible nominees. So if there's a vacancy or someone vacated a position, this is where you can have a voice and say, I have someone that might be interested in this. Here's their expertise. Let me help them contribute and become involved. Follow conflict of interest. Make sure that if you have a conflict of interest, for me to sit on a board, yet I'm being not only paid by the board, but I'm also receiving grant money, and I'm a consultant for an organization that's a competitor, all that flies into conflict of interest. So make sure that you understand what the conflict is for that organization, and assist the board in carrying out its fiduciary responsibilities. You are a financial steward. You are an organizational steward. You're a mission steward. You are a structural steward. You're a professionalism steward, and you're also a financial steward for that organization. That's what makes you an effective leader. Okay. So what is the chair's responsibility? So you have the organization, like the committee's responsibility. Now the chair. So if you're a leader within that organization, here are some of the things. I'm not going to read every one, but here are some of the things that's important to you as the leader. Overseeing the board and executive committee. You're the point person. You're that person who runs that organizational meeting in many cases. Call special meetings if necessary. Appoints people. So if you have a committee chair or someone to add into this, if you have a vacant role, you can appoint somebody to that role based on the bylaw guidelines. assist the chief executive officer in preparing and conducting meetings, any new orientation. It's important that any new people who are coming onto the board know who you are. They might have seen you on the website or seen you at a conference, but get to know them. If you can show interest and show empathy for others, we've talked about this before, showing empathy for others, you get buy-in from that individual. They're more apt to step up to say, you know what, I'm stretched a little thin, but this is really important. I want to help this. I want to help our chief executive officer or executive director or chair. I'm willing to do this. But if you're not connected with them and you just say, hey, I got more work to do, then they're like, I'm not taking that on. And so that's decreased involvement within the organization. Be present. Act as an alternative spokesperson for the organization. Always be present. So if you're part of an organization, if you're the chief or assistant chief or chair or whatever it might be, co-chair, whatever it is, always be prepared as that backup. Life events occur. What if the chair has to step out and says, I cannot continue this meeting? Can somebody take it over? And this is where the co-chair or this is where other individuals can step in and say, now I'm going to help. I'm ready to lead this, this next step. Vice chair, again, we've talked about a little bit of these with my conversation. Vice chair is there ready to step up. They're ready. They're attending all the meetings. They're serving the executive committee in some way. They're ready to carry out special assignments or lead special assignments, but also ready to take over if it's necessary, if the chief or chair is not available. Secretary's responsibility, they're the ones, again, attends all board meetings, but they're the ones that help support the executive committee by making sure everything stays organized, stays on track, aligns with the bylaws, make sure they're taking minutes. Minutes are incredibly important to show progression of improvement within the organization. And they also assume the responsibilities of the chair in absence of board chair or vice chair or chair-elect. So it's a succession plan. That individual knows the ins and outs of the organization, knows the ins and outs of the expectations. Treasurer is the financial piece. They typically run the financial committees. They provide financial reports back to the chief financial officer or executive board members. They are the individuals that create the annual budgets. They create the annual audits. They help support that annual audits quite frequently. If it's a for-profit or nonprofit, you still have to report things to the IRS. So again, the treasurer's reports, the treasurer's connection goes directly. That's why they're on the executive committee, because financial responsibility is important to the overall sustainability of the organization. Rules and bylaws. So rules and bylaws, most organizations will follow Robert's Rules for Order, the parliamentarian procedures, but bylaws are sort of your governing doctrine. They're your constitution, if you will. And so the organization might have a template. For example, some organizations might have state-based organizations or chapters. The national organization will hand the state-based chapter, or state-based organization or chapter or regional chapter, here's the bylaws template. You may revise these sections if necessary, but these sections have to remain in place. And it creates continuity between the organization and what the chapters look like. So overview of the bylaws, revisions to bylaws, understand those bylaws. What can be changed, what can't be changed. If you need more resources, say your organization started at 500 members and now you're sitting around 2,000, 3,000 members. There's a lot of work that's still being done for the organization specifically to support that growth. So what do? You might need to, by bylaws and voting from the membership and from the organization, like the committees, the executive committee and the directors and so forth, you might have to develop a whole new committee. So if you don't have an educational committee and that's one of your missions, then you need an educational committee. So you can vote that into a committee where these individuals on the committee are appointed, but you have two that are elected or whatever the structure might be. But it's important to know who's elected, who's appointed, what's the term limits and so forth. What happens if, for example, during COVID, there's a lot of organizations that had bylaws in place, but had to pivot on some of those bylaws because of the structure, and they didn't hold an election for a year, which throws the election cycles off. So people stayed in their role for a little longer. So there's these little nuances that the bylaws can help guide you with. So Robert's Rules are a set of overall standards and beliefs that have to do with what's quorum. How do you make a motion within an organization? So you have a motion and you have a proposal, points of discussion. Then you say, okay, I'm ready to make a motion for the development of a committee. I second the motion. Okay, seconding a motion then brings it to an overall board vote. So the board says, okay, all in favor say aye, all opposed, all abstain. So you give people an opportunity to speak their voice, give feedback to the motion. Let's talk about it. And then it makes a collective decision versus an executive order to say, we're doing this now. Because that disassociates the collectiveness of the board's decision making. So that's why it's important to understand what are the Roberts rules, what is considered quorum. Quorum not just being, we have X number of members across the whole membership, but we only have this many in the executive committee. What's quorum for activities and motions and so forth? If it's overall change to bylaws or it's overall change to, the structure, the mission, vision, all that, you need a overall majority of the membership. But if you're changing, such as adding a committee or voting on a new subgroup or whatever, then that can be held within the executive committee. Again, your bylaws will stipulate a lot of that, but they follow those Roberts rules in many, many cases. Board responsibilities: duty of oversight, duty of care, duty of obedience, and duty of loyalty. So duty of oversight for profit versus nonprofit. So for profit, duty of oversight, differences in the mission and vision and so forth. The mission of the for-profits is to generate income. It's to make sure the stakeholders are happy with the growth of the organization, the structure, and the guidance of the organization. It's profit sharing and so forth. Liability coverage for the members on the board. So to be able to be on the board in a for-profit, there's liability coverage in case something goes wrong, in case there's illegal activity, things of that nature. So for-profits are different than the nonprofit oversight. Not-for-profit oversight is very different. It's mission-driven, it's membership-driven, and it's based on the community. So for-profit organizations, those are different. They're all about, the focus is making profit. The focus is appeasing shareholders and aligning with shareholder needs. But at the same time, their constraints are different. Whereas non-for-profit, you have the 501c3 status or these tax opportunities that is tax exempt. Income is usually mission related. So anything related to grants, anything related to scholarship donations and so forth, all are related to how does that go back into the organization. For example, you might have a fellowship or you might have a scholarship drive or some sort of organizational sort of profit making. That can all be tied into money from this goes to our scholarships. Money from this is going to go to our educational platform. Money from and so you tie it back into the professional organization where it's not money for the sake of money. Duty of oversight, liability coverage if necessary. About 1 in 100 nonprofits each year will file a claim. So that's why it's important that you have some sort of liability coverage in there. So it depends on whatever your organizational structure is, whatever your mission and visions are, and so forth. There's different types of cost structures. There's different types of average payouts based on a liability suit and so forth, and that can vary based on whatever the suit is. But here's an example that has to do lawsuits that are brought in response to action. So it just, again, it depends on whatever the situation is. It depends on what the intent of your organization is. Directors and officers liability insurance. This is the liability insurance payable to the directors and to the officers of a company or to the organization itself as indemnification or reimbursement for losses or for any advancement in defense costs. So that's, again, the oversight piece. So if your responsibility is the oversight of the organization, you're commonly in a space that you might be the target when it comes to liability. So that is why these organizations, many organizations have liability coverage in some way to be able to protect their leadership, but also protect the organization. Duty of care. The duty of care describes the level of competence that is expected of the board members. You're part of this board. We have a core expectation of what your expectations are. We have a core level of expectation what your responsibilities are, commonly expressed as the duty of care that an ordinary prudent person would exercise. So when we invite you to be a part of a board, we have a core set of, okay, you should operate at minimum this threshold. We, of course, want you to be more self-motivated, want you to be more self-guided, and at the same time, passionate about moving the work forward. But they owe a duty to exercise responsible care of the organization. So you're caring for others. You're not going around bad-mouthing other members of the board directly outside of a personal conversation, or you're avoiding any semblance of deterioration of the organization, but you're also not sort of combining efforts within certain other people. We have to get this person out. We have to get this, and sort of targeting individuals. Your care is to the mission and vision of the organization and to the leadership of the organization. If you have legitimate concerns, that's where you bring it up to the board. Duty of care is also, again, we talked about being prepared for meetings, staying informed of an issue. You come prepared. If you're not prepared, you're not supporting the organizational work. Participate in discussions. Speak up to reach resolution of business. So if people are in the discussion about a new motion or whatever it might be, and you're just sitting there not ever giving any feedback, what's your level of engagement? You might have great feedback or a concern, such as, I've seen this happen before and it fell apart, but I just won't say anything. Well, that's not a duty. You've not performed your duty of care of the organization. So make sure you're speaking up. Make sure you're speaking up for the organizational efforts. Communication. Each board member must be able to communicate effectively, professionally, calmly, and confidently. If it turns into a fighting match where everyone's voices are raised and screaming, there's no productivity. There is no trust. There is no respect for one another. The number one dysfunction of any team is the absence of trust. If you can't trust the individuals, if you share something with someone and immediately gets put on Facebook or social media or shared with other board members, you've now lost trust within that individual. And an absence of trust will deteriorate communication. Facts need to be sound and opinion scarce, meaning facts is what you focus on. What's the fact? This is the money that's in our budget. This is the three organizations that come to us for financial support or for a vision of something that they want us to be partners with. Opinions are scarce. Now, there are times during board meetings or activities where you say, tell me what you think about this. That's different. You're providing a professional assessment or opinion about something. I'm talking about slanderous opinions that just go off on the rails and immediately there's a negativity. I've been part of some boards before. That person worked very hard, said all the right things, got on the board. Every single thing won't work. Nope, that won't work. Nope, that won't work. Nope, I've seen that happen. Nope, that won't work. And was an obstructionist with every single activity that was ever done or attempted on the board. Communicate. If this is the lack of understanding that makes you act that way, please tell us. If it's a lack of understanding or you just didn't hear the message, please tell us. We can help you. Demonstrate effective listening and comfort with both